The final department that we're going to be looking at in this series is the mixing, also called the re-recording department. In this department, what they are responsible for is taking the material from the sound department and the music department and creating the final soundtrack for the piece. They do this by cleaning up the production tracks and incorporating the ADR elements, so using different processing tools to eliminate background noise, minimize it, clarify the dialogue, as well as integrate the different lines of dialogue that were recorded in the post-production process. They also create an overall balance between dialogue, sound effects design, and music. So this is one of the really important choices that gets made in the finalizing of any sort of piece, because what this is doing is essentially telling us what we narratively need to be paying attention to. So in the case of a dialogue-heavy scene where we need to be really paying attention to what people are saying, that means that everything needs to get out of the way. Everything needs The last department that we're going to be looking at today is the mixing department. This department is primarily responsible for taking the material from the sound department and the music department and creating the final soundtrack. They do this by cleaning up any of the production tracks and incorporating ADR elements, which means that they're taking processing tools in this stage to eliminate excess noise, to try and fold in those re-recorded lines so that they play more naturally with the rest of the production elements, as well as creating an overall balance between the dialogue and sound effects elements and music. This is a really key portion of the process because this informs what we as an audience are going to be attaching to in a narrative construct, whether we're paying attention to the dialogue, if it's a heroic music moment, or if it's a place where we're going to focus on sound effects or design details like a ship flying overhead and we want to hear all of those little elements included in it. They also create a sense of space and placement with the sound. Something that's really interesting about the way that films are mixed for theaters and the way that television is increasingly mixed for distribution because of all of the advances in home entertainment systems is the ability to think about placement of sound in a 360-degree sphere. And that it's not all happening in front of us, but it has the ability to actually happen around us, creating different immersive, inclusive environments for storytelling. The department head of the mix department is the re-recording mixer. Typically in the United States they work in teams of 2, so you would have someone who is responsible for the dialogue and the music, and a mixer who is responsible for backgrounds, Foley, sound effects, and design elements. And this is a typical designation between the areas. You'll also see this person sometimes in credits called the supervising sound mixer, additional sound mixer, or sound re-recording mixer. In the case of additional sound mixers, this would appear on those larger projects, like a Transformers, where they have multiple different mix crews working because there's so much content to get through. And so someone would be identified as the primary re-recording mixer, and then there would be additional mix crews who work directly underneath them to bring the project to completion. The crew for the mix department is the recordist and the engineer. The recordist is working directly with the re-recording mixer to help set up and manage the flow of the session. They will receive the materials from the assistant editors in the sound and music department and use that to start setting up the layout for the actual mixing console, the mix interface. Throughout the mix, they'll be on hand to help with any of the navigational organizational elements, as well as creating all of the different deliverable content for the project, including the print masters, the stems, the layback, etc. The engineer, because this is a setup that requires technical support, the engineer is on hand to make sure that all of the equipment is functioning as it is intended. So working with the recordist to make sure that there are no issues with any of the routing, with any of the outboard hardware, etc. We'll finish this final section by looking at an interview with the re-recording mixer Jeff Habosh, who's worked on a number of different very high-profile projects, and listen to him talking about some of the aesthetic choices that he makes when approaching mixing content. That concludes our series for this week. Be sure to review these different sections and take the practice quiz online so that you are prepared for our in-class discussion the next time we meet, as well as the quiz itself.
You know, it's about trading off, and it's about the only way, and I've always said the only way to know is to try it. So, you know, you go through a sequence, and what happens a lot with huge sound effects and huge 100-piece orchestra score, and you're all playing, you're both going full blast, you just get this wall and it just becomes a mess and you lose definition, and you need to find how you can make the sequence work with all these elements that are going. What we do is we always have a lot of separation on the score, and Greg has separation obviously with the sound effects. We will sit there and investigate. It becomes like almost a scientific project where you find maybe a percussion that's messing things up a little bit, that's kind of murking things, or a low synth that just gets a little gauzy in some areas. And you can extract, and you can sit there and either with a fader try and change it, or internally, music editorial will go in and just take this one section. I'll use an example. There's a sequence with a Osprey chopper helicopter, cool, just blades, and then you've got a percussion sort of doing the same thing, and it gets a little messy. And you would maybe just take out a section of maybe like 5-10 seconds to clear up this area, and so many other sounds will live, and the rest of the score is still driving along. The strings or the brass is still going along, but you've cleaned up, you've experimented with things. Other areas, the music is driving, it's going. Sound effects will take a back seat for a moment because it's a hero moment. It's, up there on the screen, there's like the cool hero stuff happening, and the music, the tune, is just a great heroic score that you don't want to obliterate with other sounds. And the sound effects at a lower level still live, but the music can take the lead at that point. So it's a good balance with people that all understand what needs to be done, and between Ethan, Eric, Greg, myself, Steve, and everybody involved, we discuss it, we try it. The only way to know is to try. And ultimately, you present it to Michael to see how he likes it. And he'll say, you know what, that's great, but let's put some sound effects back in the sequence. Or he'll say, I like that, but let's raise the music a little bit here, and let's let the music take the lead. Let's pull the sound effects back a little. So it's a group process that turned out really well on this film. Very pleased and very proud of the way everything turned out with all our blends.